For as much as we love video game stories, the writing of them often is far from subtle. With major reveals or plot twists telegraphed sometimes hours in advance, it can often lead to narratives that follow a predictable trajectory, and fans get clued in on details earlier than anticipated. In a lot of these cases as well, this often revolves around the fates of specific characters. That doesn't mean the stories are badly written though, and just because players might figure out where something is going, that doesn't always take away from the impact of the moment when it does finally arrive. Even better, some developers actually use the feeling of inevitability that comes with knowing what's going to happen next to their advantage. Either way, all of the following games had incredibly moving death scenes, and these were the specific moments we knew these characters had to die. It goes without saying as well, but plenty of spoilers ahead. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 8 exact moments we knew video game characters were doomed to die. Number 8. Dom speaks to his wife, Gears of War 3. Dom is one of Gears of War's most tragic characters, and his death sequence in the third game, for many, is one of the industry's most moving. With the soldier selflessly sacrificing himself to save his brothers in arms, set against the series' unofficial theme song Mad World, it's an expertly constructed goodbye to a fan favourite. Of course, Dom dying doesn't really come as much of a surprise. In fact, there are plenty of hints throughout the game that this is the only way his story could end. After losing wife Maria in the second installment, Marcus's best mate becomes a shell of a man in the third. He's lost his entire family to this never-ending war, and he spends most of the third game feeling downtrodden and lacking the spark he had previously. He is, perhaps justifiably so, a right cry-arse. However, the exact moment that you know Dom is doomed comes in the same level he dies in. Returning to his hometown on a mission, he visits Maria's grave. Here, he tenderly talks to his departed wife and children, telling them that one day soon, they'll be reunited. The scene clearly shows that Dom already has one foot in the grave, and so desperately pines to be reunited with his family, a wish he'd be granted shortly after. Number 7. It Can Only Be Mordin, Mass Effect 3. Mordin has one of the most satisfying arcs in the Mass Effect trilogy, a leading scientist in the Genophage program which originally stopped a destructive Krogan army from accidentally destroying the whole galaxy via sterilizing the entire species. The Solarian scientist always struggled with the ramifications of his contributions. He helped the Genophage remain active when the Krogan began to develop an immunity to it, but wondered whether what he did was actually right in the long run. This is expanded upon in the third game massively, where a cure for the Genophage is actually in sight, and Commander Shepard is ultimately the one to decide whether to disperse it or sabotage it. No matter what you do though, Mordin is hell-bent on the former option, even when the building where the cure needs to be administered is on the verge of being destroyed. If you do choose to help him, which most players did, Mordin will say only he can do it, as anyone else might get it wrong. He and you both know that going to the top of the building to do this is a death sentence, and once he tells Shepard it can only be him, you know he has no intention of coming back. Number 6. Cole's Fall from Grace, L.A. Noire. By virtue of L.A. Noire being, a noir-themed piece of fiction, most players knew leading man Cole Phelps didn't have much of a chance of getting out alive. Still, perhaps his virtue and annoyingly by-the-book attitude would see him come out victorious in the end, right? Well, it turns out Cole isn't quite the goody two-shoes he's initially presented as. The top-of-his-class war hero turns out to be a bit of a rascal, having an affair with a German singer late in the game. This gets him demoted, and his rise in the police force suddenly comes to an end. Even worse, it's revealed that Cole's war past wasn't quite as decorated as made out either, and by following orders to send in a flamethrower unit to clear out a position, he accidentally got a bunch of civilians killed. Shortly after these reveals, the game shifts focus to Jack Kelso, someone who served with Cole in the war and hates his guts, who's roped into helping his former rival solve a case. It's here when you realize Cole is doomed. Kelso is charming outside of the system and understands that the corruption can't be challenged from within. You're also playing as him now, a late game protagonist shift to highlight who the true hero of the story is. Basically, he's everything that Cole isn't, and the Cops Fall from Grace cements a conclusion where Kelso lives and Cole dies after learning his former ideals were flawed the whole time. Number 5. Larry's a Big Guy, The Walking Dead. Everyone loves a bit of foreshadowing before a major death, but Mark in Telltale's The Walking Dead pretty much only exists to spout prophetic knowing lines and then die in an ironic fashion a little while later. For one, the character foreshadows his own death in the game, when he tells Lee that he would have been food without his help. Of course, the implication is that he'd end up as Zombie Chow, but later in the episode he ends up as a captive of a bunch of cannibals, and his legs are served up for dinner. That's difficult-ish to spot, but his other line is a bit more on the nose. He also says how he'd hate to be trapped in a room with Larry, the stubborn brute of the group, because of his size and temper. Well, later in the game, when the survivors are trapped in a room with him, the meat locker of the cannibals no less, you know it's not going to end well for the guy. In true fashion, just like Mark warned, Larry's temper gets the better of him and he suffers a heart attack. Not wanting to be stuck in a small room with a zombie the size of Larry, Kenny can crush his head, with it being ambiguous as to whether or not he's actually dead before his face is cracked open. In this case, I suppose it's better safe than sorry? I don't know, I'm pleased it wasn't me. Number 4. Peter's decision, Marvel's Spider-Man. The ending of Marvel's Spider-Man proves exactly why stories about the Webhead have remained so compelling for so long. After battling a bunch of villains and acquiring the cure for the Devil's Breath, a biological weapon that's infected the population of New York City, including Peter's own Aunt May, Parker is told that the whole sample of the cure is required, alongside around a day of analysis, to mass produce an antidote for everyone. The thing is, May is dying right now and can't wait this long for a cure to be produced. He could use it on her and save her right this instant, but that would mean dooming so many others in the process. In that moment, you might imagine yourself giving your own aunt the cure and sacrificing everyone else, but you know that isn't a decision Spider-Man can make. With great power comes great responsibility and all that, and even before Aunt May pushes him in that direction, you know that's the noble choice a superhero of this caliber would have to make. Number 3. Explaining how body switching works, Soma. Soma has a devilishly dark ending that puts any great horror movie to shame. You spend the entire game attempting to launch an ark into space, after the Earth has all but been destroyed and humanity has transferred its remaining consciousness into machines to survive. Your job is to upload you and the consciousness of your partner to a digital ark and then fire it into space so humanity can continue to survive in virtual reality after the planet dies. In the end, you manage to succeed as well, but not quite in the way that your character expected to. That's because the upload process isn't like a regular transfer. Instead, it's more of a duplication. Uploading to the Ark means that your consciousness is copied, creating 2 versions of it, all with the same memories. Consequently, a version of your character makes it out, but the one that you've been playing as remains trapped on a dying planet in a shell of a body. It's a great, haunting twist. However, this process actually is laid out in full hours prior. You need to upload your consciousness once prior to the ending to take advantage of a stronger body. Unlike during the ending though, when you first accomplish this, your perspective switches and you control the new body. However, your old body remains trapped to the chair you just beamed out of, leaving 2 versions of the character. The same thing obviously happens at the end of the game, only this time you don't jump with the consciousness, a fact which you might have been preparing for the whole time. Number 2. Playing as Abby, The Last of Us Part 2. Ever since the very first trailer was revealed, fans hypothesized that Joel had to die in The Last of Us Part 2. This was a game all about Ellie's revenge, and no revenge on the part of the character or the player would be more justified than that of Joel's murder. Consequently, even if you hadn't seen the leaks, every moment spent with him was met with unease, especially if you'd seen the trailer showing the inciting incident, which suggested that Ellie's journey would be indeed sparked by a murder, hinted to be Dina's here, inside a certain building. While you might have been fooled by the sneaky marketing, however, it becomes clear who the real victim is going to be early on in the game, as soon as you play as Abby in fact. Though her conversations are vague, she mentions that she and her group are looking for a man, and even though the name isn't said, you know it has to be Joel, and you know her reason has to regard the murders he committed in the previous game. A lot of people figured out exactly where the prologue was going from that moment, but the writing is on the wall even more when Joel and Tommy ride directly into the camp of the people who are seeking them out. Number 1. John Marston's quiet epilogue, Red Dead Redemption. It was probably daft ever thinking that John Marston could ever live happily ever after. Red Dead Redemption is all about how time is moving beyond old outlaws like him, and in order to fully do that, America needs a clean break. It's why the entire Van der Linde gang had to be snuffed out in the first place, and you didn't really think the federal agents who tasked John with gunning his former friends down were just going to leave him as a loose end and a walking reminder of those kind of men. Well, yeah, honestly. This is a game after all, and John jumps through so many hoops to get back to his family. when he does finally fulfill his promise, he returns to his ranch and begins his life again, dreaming of the day that he can finally put his guns down for good. When you pick up in the epilogue on the ranch, it feels like you're getting a taste of what this domestic bliss will be like. But then, it keeps going. Once the epilogue extends beyond the natural endpoint and then doesn't hit credits, that's when you know there is something sinister in store for John. The ending is too perfect, too neat, and you're playing far too much of it. You don't know when it's going to happen, but every second that epilogue continues past the point that it could have just faded to black, you know you're one step further to seeing John atone for his past life. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Were there any video game moments where you knew a character had to die in the future? And were you as clued in on these, or did they take you by surprise? Either way, while you're down there, can you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.